Our third storyteller is Jordan Borstelmann, and everyone who has come up to him this evening has said, "Oh, you're the guy from Satchels." And I said, "Buddy, I think you're a little bit of a mascot." So, and he luckily took that in the right way, the way that I meant it, which was a good way. So you may recognize him as well, mainly by his kilt or his prominent beard. So, but he is a Gulf Coast native, and he was a beach bum for most of his early life. He has been telling wild and woolly tales of swords and sorcery for about 22 years in the form of Dungeons and Dragons, one of his passions, which uses a mix of improvisation and imagination. Personally, I don't think it gets any better than that. Through starting to tell stories at the Conch, Jordan started telling stories about his own life and building a new skill, and these are his words, not mine, building the skill of reworking his own mostly boring experiences into something someone else might want to hear. And I think that you'll find that Jordan is far from boring, so let's welcome him to the stage.
Great. Hey guys. Man, the hardest part of any story, whenever I'm telling a story, is the first three sentences. And how do you start it? How do you go? How do you follow that? This is something that is not. Well, it's just a story of my boring life. I moved to Gainesville maybe 15, 20-ish years ago. Time is a river, right? And on that river, I moved to Gainesville from the beach, and I love the beach. I love the water, and I've always grown up in it. I swam like a seal since I was a little kid, blubber and everything included. And, when I came to Gainesville, the one thing I thought I was going to miss was the water. But, of course, here in the center of the state, we have a beautiful system of lakes and rivers and crystal clear springs. And as I started to learn to enjoy that, I started to have some minor adventures along the way. And one of the first ones that I really remember clearly was on the Ichetucknee. And the Ichetucknee, if you don't know, is just beautifully clear. You can see the bottom. It is like pristine. If you imagine Tarzan swimming in the jungles, this is kind of the river that you're going to picture. It's a beautiful jungle. And my friends were coming from out of town, and they wanted to take a trip on the Ichetucknee. In the classic way, you all know, to get on the Ichetucknee is by tube. And you sit in a big floating donut, and you float down this river. Well, they didn't want to do that. They wanted to go in a canoe. So my wife and I, we get a canoe. Our friends, they get a canoe. Except some of them want a tube. So we get a tube for one adult that's going to be trailed behind one of their canoes. And we get a second tube also attached. So it's a little train. It's a tube train. And at the end of that is two little kids. And they're young. They're probably, I don't know, they're like waist high, however old you are when you're waist high. I don't, kids. But they've got their life vests on. They're real safe. They've got a little net in the donut hole of the tube so they don't fall in. They're being good little kids. And those are the only people who are being good on this trip, because as we're going down, there's 3 adults in their canoe. And within 15 minutes, they're switching spots 3 different times. Oh, I don't want to be in the back. I don't know how to steer. Oh, let me get up front. Oh, this seat's uncomfortable. Back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And so my wife and I, as we often do when there's like really annoying people on the river, we just go ahead and pull ahead. We roll right ahead. And as soon as I'm about to take a nice deep sigh of relief, we round the bend, we're out of sight. I'm going, and then we hear a scream and a splash. And that sigh is no longer a sigh of relief. We turn around and we start rowing upstream. And the Ichetucknee is not necessarily a swift river. It's not rapids, but it sucks going upstream. It's not slow. So we managed to get up there, and sure enough, there we are. We see our friends. The canoe is overturned. The fella in the middle had decided it was a good idea to just get up and jump out. He wanted to go swimming, and clearly no idea how canoes work. So they're chasing their wet cigarettes and their cell phones and their sunglasses. And I realize, where are the inner tubes? And we look around and we can see, okay, there they are. About 10 feet off the bank, there are these 2 inner tubes. And the little kids, the good little kids, they were all right. They're sitting in the tubes and they're pointing and laughing at their parents. But the lady who was in her tube, who's supposed to be watching the kids, is nowhere to be seen. So my wife and I, we start rowing over there. And as I get closer, I can see these 2 hands sticking up from the inside of that donut tube. And as we get closer, I can see her face. And it's a classic position. Her head is just barely above the edge of the water. She's looking straight up at the sky to keep her mouth and nose out of the water because she's been trying to get up into this tube, and she hasn't been able to do it. She's just the right proportion of shape and out of shape. She can't manage it. And now she's doing this kind of breathing that growing up on the beach I've heard before, and it kind of goes like this. It goes, and her face is red, and there's water getting in her mouth, but she's spitting it out. And all it's going to take is one little drop of water to go down the wrong way. She's going to start coughing. She's going to let go of the tube, and she's going to go underwater. And now she's going to have to keep from coughing while submerged, and she's going to drown. Oh, boy. So I use this voice I like to think of. This is my football voice. And as we pull up and I see this, I use my football voice, and I say, hey, you're okay. You're safe. It's all right now. You're saved. She's nowhere near saved. Like, we just pulled up. I don't know what's going on at all. But I'm like, hey, you're saved. It's fine. And she starts to calm down, and she wants to grab onto our canoe. And I've got the oar held like a spear, ready to jab her in the face, because if she turns over the canoe, the whole game's over, right? So I say, look, calm down. Don't try to get in the you're saved. It's done. You're fine. Chill out. You're going to grab onto our canoe, but you're not going to climb up. We're just gonna go over here to the edge, and you're gonna be fine. You're gonna stand in the sand, and you'll be all right. And she's like, oh, but there's things. And I'm like, look, there might be. You might lose a toe, but it's gonna be like you're not gonna drown, which is what's happening now. So off we went to the edge, and she was fine. She calmed down. She got her breath back. In the canoe she went, and she was a horrible ride the whole way. She kept leaning to one side or the other, right? And so that meant my wife had to lean to one side or the other. But it was, it's something that I realized at that point. It was kind of the first time I realized that as soon as you get to the water, as soon as your little toe, just like in the beach in my hometown, as soon as you put that little toe in the water, you're in the wilderness. You're not in a nice, safe place necessarily. You're in the wild. There are things that are going to want to get you, and sometimes that's your own stupidity. And she wasn't being stupid. I don't mean to play it out like that, but there was another time, and this is the time when my wife and I encountered probably one of the most dangerous creatures that is going to live in and around the waters here in Central Florida. We had rented a houseboat and took it up and down the St. Johns River. And unlike the Ichetucknee River, which is clean and pristine, the St. Johns River is a blackwater river. If you're man boob deep, you can't see your belly button. It's that dark. And so it's our first night out on this houseboat, and we're driving along, and I'm just learning how to do this. I've never really driven a houseboat before, and so I'm doing this kind of serpentine pattern when really I think I'm going straight. But it's getting to be evening, and we decide to stop, and it's our first night. It's our very first night, and so we want to get in the water. And so now I'm going to kind of paint you. We get to this alcove on the side of the river, and I want to paint you this picture of our boat. This is a picture with words, and you're gonna see 2 pontoons, sort of side by side with a space in the middle. And then there's a flat platform across these pontoons, and the house is on top of that, right? Now this platform is going to reach out past the edge of the pontoons in the front and the back, and it kind of makes a little deck out front and a little deck out back. And so you got a ledge. And so we're ready to get in the water. It's not dark yet, and my wife is real excited. She gets her bathing suit on, and she's in before I can blink. And she's swimming around, and I hear her squeak once because her foot touches, something down there in the water, and it's deep. You can't touch, and there's like a branch or some such. And I get my bathing suit on, and I jump into, and we swim around for a little bit, and we realize it's getting a little dark. Let's get back into the boat. And so now here's where I want you to picture that ledge. And at the very end of that ledge is a ladder that comes down. And the genius who decided to create this ladder thought the best place for the last rung of the ladder would be just touching the surface of the water. So if you want to put your foot on the bottom rung of the ladder, you have to take your foot and get it about the height of your chin to do so. It's a little easier to do in the water. And then you reach up and you sort of grab the rails and you try to pull yourself up. So I'm going to do this. And as soon as I put any weight on that ladder, sure enough, that guy who really did a good job designing this ladder decided to put hinges on it so that as you put your foot and weight on it, it swings up underneath the ledge, and suddenly you're Sylvester Stallone in Cliffhanger. You're upside down above the water. And it's really all about your upper body strength at this point. Fortunately, I'm a blacksmith, and I was able to climb up. My wife is strong in many other ways, but upper body is not one of them. So she's getting prepared to get up and into the boat. And I'm like, hey, look, just grab onto the rails on either side, get your foot as best you can, and I'll reach down, and I'll pull you up. And so as I put my one hand on the rail, and my other hand, I reach down to grab her. And as I lean forward, her eyes go wide. Her pupils dilate. And she screams 3 words. It's got me. And immediately, my inner Conan jumps out. And I lean even further forward, and I'm ready to throttle it. I'm ready to kill it. I'm going to wrestle this alligator or snake or anaconda, whatever I don't give a fuck what it is. I'm going to take it out. And so I got my hand on the rail, and I'm leaning forward. I'm trying to look through the deep, dark, black waters to see a hint of scale or tail or something that I can get, because it's got her. And she screams again even louder. And I'm freaking out. And she manages what seems like an hour or days or I don't even know what. She manages to get out. The gate's got me. And I realize that my hand is not on the railing but on the gate. And every time I'm leaning forward, I'm pushing that gate on her finger, and it's crushing it more and more. Oh, man. So I will say that if it wasn't for that massive amount of adrenaline, I'm not sure I could have heaved her up and out of the water. But as it was, I did it one-handed. And the rest of the trip was just really great.